You are just determined. Get away. She's awful. She's terrible. Oh, for heaven's sake. That's her tail wagging, hitting up against the other one's coat. Cordelia, or no, are you Cordelia? That's what I talked about in the horn segment. Okay, run. Would you? It's really rainy and miserable today. It's like a very typical March day. So what better way to spend it than out here with my beautiful, loving girls, right? This is Adelina. Beautiful, beautiful. So it's March, what is it, 20th, I think? Yes, it is March 20th, Sunday. So Rich and I spoke last night about starting to rue, because it's still could get cold, but decided that I'm going to start ruing any of the unbred ewes, which is going to be pretty much lambs. And Lucretia. So that'll get me started anyway. And I think I might want to start with this one, Miss Princess, friendly girl. She just all of a sudden became my best friend. Like within the last 3 days, realized how nice it is to get scritches. I'm putting the crook up because they keep on knocking over my camera. So maybe you can go up on the table and get some of your wool off. So what I'll do is I'll just take off the wool that's under the coat and then put the coat back on them so that they don't get bullied because they look so different when they go back out. Maybe I'll do you. Maybe I'll get to room my princess. Hi, Bea. Hi, Bianca. How are you? Mabel? Mabel's not going to get rude yet because she's going to have a baby, I think. So she'll be on the list for next year. I'm pretty sure I rooed her. Stop it, Bea. Hey, no. Pretty sure I rooed her last year. I do have records. I kept records of everybody. Who I rooed and who I had sheared. Right, sweet girl. You just love this, don't ya? I'm watching you. Oh, there's grass at the end of the board that I have the camera on, so they're interested in that. I know. Oh, would you please? Not get your snot all over my camera. Come on. Stop it. Oh, you are just determined. Please. You're just not going to stop till you knock it down. Go on. So I'm going to check this one. I'm going to just check her and see. It's all this one Septima. She's just determined to figure out how that camera can get knocked over. I mean, oh my God, I love you so. Will you stop trying to mess with my camera every time? My arms get tired. I sure hope that it's showing up on the camera. Well, yes, hello. What am I gonna do when you're bigger? Don't do that to me. Huh? What am I gonna do when you're a big girl? Alright, let's give you a looky-loo here while I can. I also want to see about ruining this one. Just because her fleece is going to be so cool. And little Bea, I think I'm going to leave yours on because it's, I don't know, I think I worry about you being so little. Let's see what we got here. Come here. This will be my project for this afternoon. Just see. Hang on. Of course you don't like it because you're a baby. You never did anything. Does not seem to want to rule. She's mad at me. So if you've never watched my videos or don't know anything about the farm, ruing is where this breed, Shetlands, have a trait where there's a break in the fleece in the spring when it gets warm, and if they're in the wild, they would shed their fleeces. But it gives you the ability, as the fleece harvester, to pluck the fiber, pluck the wool from their body, instead of using clippers and shears. So it's a really nice thing to do. And I did it with quite a few ewes last year, maybe 20, maybe more. No, it's about 20. It makes a really cool fleece because it's totally, you know, it's actually the staple. There's no second cuts or anything. Septimus jealous of you, princess. Could she be any sweeter? You are so sweet. Oh, I love you. How are you? Pretty girl. They like it when I rub them. There's this bone, like flat spot. It's probably like right about here, their equivalent. Oh, and they love that when I scratch that down there. The tail's wagging. You do like it, don't you? It's so nice. So nice to be out here with you guys. I wish I could live out here. Hand's getting sore. Yep, I want you on there. The only older ewe I didn't breed was, I don't think I bred Septima actually, now that I think about it. I had to, we were going to use a ram, Falstaff, also known as Smiley, but the pen that we were going to put them in this winter, winter, was so wet, and we just decided not to use that group. So we had to kind of reorganize and move some of the ewes to different groups, and I think a couple of them fell out and just ended up not getting bred, which I think was ewe, so we should see if I can move ewe. And I also believe Susan B might have been one that didn't get bred. English Garden didn't get bred. She's my senior nursing home ewe that doesn't breed anymore, but she doesn't rue. So she's definitely going to get sheared. All this stuff I gotta figure out, huh? Oh, excuse me. Oh, stinky burps. Guys, a stinky burp. I was thinking I needed to put bigger coats on the lambs, but if I'm gonna just rue them, I don't need to do that. Just leave the same coats on. What about you? I can rue you. I rue your mommy. Come here. Let me see. Oh, all of a sudden now you're grouchy? Yeah. You are definitely, I might rue you today. What do you think about that? What do you think about that? This is just right off the back. She's got quite a bit of like solid scurf, dried up lanolin here at the base. get water for these guys. All right, so you're gonna be the one I work on today. After I get everything else done, I got planned. Wash that fleece. Wash that little sample of polytay. Check and see if I put Susan B in with anybody, because if I could brew her, that would be good. She's a bigger one. It'll take time. You're about ready to fall asleep, aren't ya? Mabel, come on. Oh. Bianca, why are you being such a little stinker?
I've just started going back to the guild meetings in my area. I belong to 2 spinning guilds. One is in Buffalo and one is in Rochester. I'm fortunate because I'm in between both cities. So it's fairly convenient for me to attend both. The Rochester Guild, it's actually called the Genesee Valley Hand Spinners Guild, it's got about 75 members. It's a really good guild. I love it. I love going to the meetings. One of the things they're doing is a breed study. So there's 2 women that have taken the initiative, gone and sourced fleeces from a variety of breeds of sheep, and then have provided a write-up. And then the process is every month they hand out a new sample of a new breed, and everybody goes home and does whatever they want. And then the next meeting, you show everybody what you've done. And a couple of the members are really making like very nice detailed binders and, you know, really good sample books and stuff. The breed study's been going on for a while, so I'm late to the party. But what I thought I would do is make a video log or a video journal of my breed study work. And I think I bring a little something different to this study because I am a breeder of sheep and I have that mentality. And so for me, you know, there's things I'm going to be evaluating that might be a little bit different than a hand spinner or a weaver. And it's interesting, I've been thinking about this a lot, and that is, you know, how do you identify in this community that we're in of knitters, spinners, farmers, sheep fanciers? How do you identify, if you had to pick one, you know, are you more a farmer? Are you more a spinner, a knitter, a weaver, you know? So I'm actually going to put a poll up. I think I'm at the point now on YouTube being at 1,000 subscribers. Thank you very much, everybody. And that I can put up polls. And I really am curious about that, especially the people that are enjoying and consuming my content on my channel. So I'm going to put up a poll. And if you have a minute, I'd love it if you'd go on there and just click which one you think of when you think that you are most predominantly. And I think I identify more as a farmer. And in fact, if I had to go in a like more general and maybe more of a philosophical approach, I would say I'm just really a hard worker. I'm not artistic or creative necessarily, but I just really like to work hard. So anyways, kind of got off on a tangent there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be journaling my experience with the breed study. And what I have done is I created a checklist, which is a big thing with me. I've got checklists for pretty much everything that I do with the business. And I wanted to go through the checklist with you so that if you had ideas or other things that I should be looking at or evaluating, you can let me know, because I'm just in the beginning of this. So I'm going to read from you the Fleece Study checklist, and I will I'll make this a document on my website that you can link to and review. I don't know if I can upload this to YouTube, but I'll put a link in the comments to this document so you can go over it when you want. All right, so the first thing obviously is the name of the breed, and then the breed association website, which is where you always go if you want to find good information about an animal breed. Go to that breed's association, the organization that is where you go to register the animals and stuff. Okay, so then I got a brief section where I want to just write up something about the breed. You know, how is that breed different from other breeds? So for example, right now, the first one I'm going to do is polypay. So this month the assignment is polypay, so all the other members of the guild are going to be doing it. So that's where I'm going to start, even though I've got a bunch of other breeds that they've all already done that I want to catch up on. So to introduce the polypay, I guess what I would say is it's a U.S. breed. It was invented here in the States back in the 70s, and it's a composite of 4 breeds, equal portions of each. And the goal, I'll go into more detail on this later, but I'm just giving this as an example. The goal of the breed is to create sheep that are very prolific, which means they have a lot of lambs, so 3 or more, and are, and that was pretty much it. They wanted to have something that had a higher output, so more lambs, and then also you can shear them twice a year, so more wool output, and also you can breed them more frequently. So they, like with Shetlands, we breed and have lambs once a year. With the polypay, my understanding, and I'm going to validate this, is they can actually have lambs 3 times a year. Shorter gestation periods. Shetlands, with the Shetlands, we're at 147 days on average. So I'll be interested to find out about the polypay and stuff. So anyway, so that'll just be like 3 or 4 sentences about what makes that breed different. Then I have a note here to do a general evaluation of the wool sample. So here is the wool sample of the polypay. They have a nice label on here. And this is what they handed out to everybody. It's about, I don't know, maybe an ounce and a half of raw fiber. So the study is going to be, we're getting the raw wool right off the fleece. We're all using wool from the same fleece, which is the thing I'm really interested in exploring further, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So general evaluation of the wool sample, just kind of in words, I'm going to write up something about, my observations of the sample. Cleanliness, crimp, handle, stuff like that. Then what I'm going to do is pull a sample and put that aside to do a micron test, to submit it to get it evaluated by Texas A&M. And I'm going to have to wait until I think the minimum they do is 5. So I'll set it aside, and when I have 5 put together, I'll submit those and then have those results. Then what I'm going to do is weigh what's left as the raw fiber, and I'm going to do that in grams because you've got better resolution using grams versus ounces. Then I'm going to take a photograph of a sample lock next to a ruler. Then I'm going to wash it, and then I'm going to weigh it after washing, and that's going to tell me how much lanolin comes out. Now, and with the polypay, that was another thing I found interesting when I read the breed association's description, is that I believe their intention is to have a fleece that does not have a lot of shrinkage. So your inbound weight when you send it to a mill is what you pay. You pay for that inbound weight when you send your wool to a mill. So I'm thinking one of the things they're trying to do is to minimize the difference between the inbound and the outbound weight. Okay, so that's that. Then I'll weigh it after the washing, then I'll take a photograph, because sometimes the character of the staple changes after it's been washed, so I'll have that comparison. And all these things I'm going to put on the video so you can watch them, and I might blog it as well, have something documented, we'll see. Then what I want to do is I want to buy an orange dye. Now I don't dye as a general rule, I'm not comfortable with it, so I got to find a very simple, safe process to do this. And I'm going to use orange because I use orange wool in my pumpkin kits. And so I figured I could use it afterwards. So I'm going to buy an orange dye, use the same dye and the same process and all of the fibers, all the samples. I'll just dye a small section of it. Then I'm going to go on to the prep, and using my Magic Craft tools, I've got the flick carder, I've got the combs, and I've got some hand cards. So I will weigh a small portion of it after it's been washed, flick it, and then weigh it after to get a sense for how much waste, flicking waste I'll have for each sample. Then I'll do it with the combing, pre and post, to get an idea of the waste, because that's important to me. Then I'll take a bit of it and just run it on the hand cards and make a roll leg. Then I'm going to make contact with either the breeder that provided us with the fleece, or somebody from the breed association that's fairly knowledgeable, maybe someone in the leadership of the breed association. Set up an interview and do, a good interview with them, and just, ask them, how do you distinguish your breed from the others? What are some of the challenges? Stuff like that. So I'll go into that. Then I'll get into the spinning portion, which is fine. I mean, I'm actually more interested in everything I've talked about up until now, but then I'll go ahead and craft things. So I will spin some on the wheel, ply some on a wheel, spin some on a spindle, ply it on a spindle, make a little felted leaf, and I might make that felted leaf with some of the waste, we'll see. Then I'm going to knit a small swatch, weave a small swatch, and crochet a small swatch. So it's pretty ambitious, but we'll see how it goes. That's just kind of my vision. I talked about the micron testing, and then once I get the oranges, after I get enough of them, I'm assuming they're going to all look a little different. I'm going to blend those on the blending board, the Magic Craft blending board, to get what that would look like, and then I'll use that for my pumpkin kits. And then I made another note here, another thing I'm going to add, if the people in the guild are open to it, I'd like to get photos at the meeting of things that people have made, and maybe have people talk about their experience with the wool as however they identify, to get those perspectives. So that's my thought. I'm going to show you a couple other things. And then I'm going to actually, as soon as I turn off this camera, I'm going to start working on the polypay sample. So it'll be next week. I'll have an update, and I'll try and give you guys an update every week on where I stand with this fleece study. I'm pretty excited about it. I've always been Shetland. So this is my first time that I have really kind of explored outside of our own wool, and I think it's about time. So let me know what you think about that. All right, so I've got the polypay. I already talked about that. Oh, and another thing I just wanted to share is that the women that are running this, there's 2 of them, also supply a nice one-page write-up with photos of the sheep, and then links to whoever they got the wool from and stuff, which is really nice. So it's just so well done. I'm just so excited about this, and really grateful for the women that are putting this together. So I have the one on the polypay. I've got a couple other ones. I've already sent an email out to this person that we sourced the fiber from. I haven't gotten back from them anything, so I'm probably going to jump up to the breed people and see if I can't get, some kind of response from them, so I can do a nice interview. All right, some of the other breeds that they've supplied so far that I was able to get from the archives, I guess. There's a sample of Tunis, a sample of California Red, South Down, Herdwick, and Drenthe Heath, which is a really interesting one. They did the presentation on. This was the one they did last month. So we'll get into it later. Can't move ahead. It's polypay right now. The other resource that I have, Rich bought this for me. Everything I have is something that Rich bought me, it seems, but at any rate. So Rich bought this for me one year for Christmas, and I haven't really used it because I've been so focused on the Shetland stuff. It was fun to read, what they said about the Shetlands. But now I have this as well as the write-up, and I think that the write-up is more of a summary, so I'll have this to use as a resource, so I don't have to go, so they've already done a lot of the legwork here, so I'm just gonna kind of use this as my guide, which is kind of weird to be using a book in these days when you can find things so easily on the internet. But it's just a great book. It smells good. Love the paper, high quality. It's got some heft. So this will be part of that. And then I'm not a weaver. I think you may know that about me if you've been viewing my videos for a while. And so I was at the Buffalo Guild meeting last week. They had their auction, their annual fundraiser auction. And so I bought a bunch of tickets, and I put quite a few tickets in the basket for this, for this really fun rigid heddle, I guess it is. And it has to be, I mean, I have to be able to do it because in the picture, there's 2 kids using it. So, I mean, right? I have to, if I can't use this, then shame on me. So this is what I'm gonna use to do my weaving samples, which I'm so excited about that. I'll take a photo of this and I'll put it here while I'm talking, but you can see it's got 1992 Parents' Choice Award, a little gold seal on the box, which I just love that. So yeah, it's comes with good instructions, comes with some of these thingies, which I'm sure you guys know what they are. I think I know what these are. I think this is what you send your yarn through. A sample, a cone, and some black yarn, which is really pretty. And then I think this is the sample yarn that they, oh, somebody already did it. Somebody already made, I didn't even know that. That must be the sample wool that came with it. What else? One of these things. One of these. Wow, that's really pretty. Let's see what else is in here. So, if those of you that know how to weave are probably looking at, rolling your eyes at me like, oh, you have no idea what you're getting yourself into, but it's okay. Save the paper. This paper is the perfect size and weight for use with your next Easy Weaver project. And then a bunch of manuals and stuff. Discover the excitement of working with fiber. Easy Weaver refill kits. And then here's a refill kit instruction. So that's what I'm going to be using. So it's going to be, you know, that's going to be a fun adventure as well. So yeah, so I think it's going to be really fun, really interesting coming from a farmer's perspective, doing a breed study for wool to be spun and knit, crocheted and woven and felted. So we'll see how it goes. Pretty excited. Hi there, thanks for stopping by to watch this video. In this video, I am going to attempt to explain horn genetics in Shetland sheep. So I did a video last year about color genetics in Shetland sheep, and it was very straightforward, fairly predictable genetics based on, you know, what the sheep look like and what their genetic makeup is. It's pretty straightforward, the color genetics. So I was asked to do a video on horn genetics. Didn't know a lot about it, so I've scratched the surface as far as doing the research and trying to learn about horn genetics in Shetland sheep. it's really complicated. So I'm going to do the presentation. I'm not claiming to be an expert on this at all. This is really just, I did, some research, read a couple articles. There's a really good article on the Fine Fleece Shetland Sheep Association website, the polled gene in North American Shetland sheep. So it's pretty much about that. And it's written by Julie here. She's not in Shetlands any longer, but she was one of the pioneers in breeding for Shetlands that didn't have horns, and we call them polled Shetlands. And I actually had a conversation with her yesterday, nice catching up, just to kind of validate some of the things I'm going to talk about in the slide deck. So anyway, so let's get to the deck, and I'll just be putting that up on the screen, so it'll be a PowerPoint, and I'll be talking you through the information I've got collected. I hope you find this helpful. Hope you like it. This presentation is going to be about horn genetics in Shetland sheep, and specifically talking about Shetland sheep because I read an article where a guy was talking about different breeds of sheep have different genetic makeup as it relates to their horns. So, add that to the complex nature of this topic. Sheep have a number of genes that determine if they have horns and what the horns will look like. So it makes it really difficult to isolate and predict your outcomes on offspring using genetic data. So if you're trying to do Punnett squares on all the different possibilities, it can get really, really complicated. So there are some ways to predict, but because of this, complex matrix of genes, it's not always reliable. But there is a way to predict whether or not you're going to get polled or horned rams or ewes. So in this presentation, I'm going to try to simplify it and help us to predict a horn phenotype in Shetland sheep with the ultimate goal of, for us anyways, the ultimate goal was we wanted to get polled rams in our flock and get rid of the horns. From the very limited research that I did, a lot of the information that is being claimed about sheep horn genetics is a little bit theoretical. And what I mean by that is that there, as far as I can see, there has never been a thorough DNA study to be able to, take a sample and test for horns. And I think the reason for that, my opinion, is that the cost to do the study is not worth it for the value you would get from it. For example, there was a big benefit to be able to modify chickens genetically so that they would have larger breasts because there was a big market for chicken breasts. And so, yes, in that area, they now know how to very carefully and easily create chickens with larger breasts. So that's a trait. But like I said, with the sheep, Shetland sheep in particular, there's not enough of them, and there's not a commercial value for doing the DNA testing. So when someone asks me, why can't you just take a blood sample and find out what their genetic makeup is, that's never been, there's no baseline, there's no standard, there's no data that allows scientists to take a blood sample from a sheep and figure out the DNA makeup for horns. Most of what we know is based on observation and testing that was done on merinos, and that's probably because there's a massive population of merinos, so you can get more data. Other species like cattle were also, in some of the studies I read, also were used because they seem to share similar horn genetics, similar locations and tendencies. So that's one piece of it that makes it complicated. And then there's other things. So the one idea is that the sheep horn genetics seem to be different even between breeds, Dorsets, Merinos, Shetlands. There's a lot of locations on the chromosomes. There's a lot of gene pairs on different spots of the chromosome that are influencing horns, not horns, and what they look like. And those are horned, not horned, polled, not polled. There's also possibly a location on the chromosomes for determining what a skir will look like, whether it'll be a knob or a thick skir or look like a full set of horns. The other thing that's complicated here that's a little different from the color genetics is the sex of the sheep also has an influence on what their horns look like. Then there's a possibility of modifiers. So another whole type of gene which coupled with another gene influences what that trait looks like. So in other words, it is very, very complicated. So the one thing I did learn that I thought was really interesting and I was surprised by is that the horn trait is recessive in sheep. And the reason I was so surprised by this is because in North America, the Shetlands, majority of the flocks are horned flocks with horned rams. So the reason for this, I think, my guess, my theory would be that if it's left up to natural selection, the horned sheep will prevail, even though it's a recessive trait, because it's an advantage to have horns. It's a weapon, and that allows them to get the best food and the best mates. One of the things I thought about was a commercial breeder is going to want polled sheep. When you think about, real high volume ranch type sheep flocks, you don't want horns because those rams are very destructive. So they will destroy walls, fencing, posts. Also, the other reason why you'd prefer polled sheep in a commercial flock is you can have rams longer. So sometimes with the spiral horns, they grow into their head. They call that fatal horns. It'll kill the ram ultimately. So you don't want to breed with them. It's just, they're not going to live as long. So they're it's just not a good situation. And then the other thing is they're just not safe to be around. If you're in a paddock with a horned ram, or even a polled ram for that matter, but a horned ram, they could be very aggressive and could, take out a kneecap or something. So that's why the commercial breeders are, I think, breeding for and selecting for polled sheep. When we look at the horn phenotype, and phenotype, again, just to reiterate this, phenotype is what is expressed, what the animal looks like. The horn phenotype is controlled by a specific location, and I'm going to really narrow in on this particular one. This is the one that most of us in the Shetland community use in order to predict what we're going to get and try and select for the traits that we like. And it's called the horn phenotype. I would argue possibly that it's actually the polled phenotype. There might be a polled phenotype and a horn phenotype, two separate locations, but because the convention with the community of Shetland breeders is to call it the horn phenotype or the horn gene, I'm going to just stick with that. So it's on a location on a chromosome, and there's 3 alleles that we understand. One of them is capital P for polled, and that is an incompletely dominant allele. And an incomplete dominance means that when you pair that with a different allele, like horned, you're not going to get a predictable trait. It's going to be a blend. Again, another part of this gets it so complicated. Then you've got P prime, the sex influenced allele, where you can get a ewe with horns, and the ram can carry that allele. So when I talk about the incomplete dominance, once again, where you get the blend of the alleles or the appearance. So the phenotype for the heterozygous makeup, and that's where you have 2 different alleles, like a capital P and a lowercase p. They could result in a range of horn types. So you could have a very clean head with no knobs or any bumps or anything, also known as fully polled. You could have what looks like a full set of horns. And anything in between, knobs or buttons or skurs. I mean, there's all sorts of appearances that you can get when you have a heterozygous horn genotype. All right, so this is what we think right now within the Shetland community. And there's a lot of farmers that really pay attention to this. And so it's based on observations, right? It's not based on taking a blood test and getting a sample and comparing it to a standard to see. It's about farmers that have been breeding and looking at their results and then able to draw conclusions from that and then sharing that information. And, we're all kind of validating it in the community. This is the kind of the table where you can make your predictions, and there's a lot more combinations than this, obviously, because I've got 3 different alleles, right? So I just put up a couple of them. So the one is a full poll, capital P, and because it's influenced by sex, I have a little column here for the male and the male I got in blue and the female in pink. So a PP full poll, the male will be hornless and the female will be hornless. When you have a heterozygous condition of capital P for full poll and lowercase p for horns, this is called a half pole sometimes, and it's also a horn carrier. So you're carrying horns, which is very counterintuitive to me because I've heard people talk about carrying the pole gene, which I think is incorrect. I think that if the pole allele is dominant, then the recessive is what you carry. All right, so if you have a heterozygous condition for pole, the male could be anything from a clean pole to what looks like a full set of horns. And the female could have knobs, little bumps where the horns would be. If you have a fully horned genotype, lowercase p, the male is going to express with a full set of horns. And the female could express knobs. I'm not sure if that is like she would or if she could. So I'm not 100% sure on that one. And then the P prime is where you've got the sexually influenced genotype, and a P prime homozygous for P prime. The male is going to have a full set of horns, and the female will have a full set of horns, but they're going to be really straight, thin, more like goats, I guess. So when I was talking to Julie, she gave me a couple other things that she has observed. And one of them is when you've got a ewe which has a dome on her head, that could mean that she is fully polled. So 2 capital P's, homozygous for polled. If you have a ram with very deep grooves where the horns would be, that could mean he's fully polled. Again, homozygous for polled, capital P, capital P. So now what I want to do, this is the end of the science part of this. I want to show you some examples from our flock, and I've got some interesting lambs this year particularly that I want to show you. So we're going to go into that section now. Starting out with our ewe Audi. She's a black ewe, and I just took a picture of the top of their heads just so you can see what we're talking about when we talk about the different phenotypes. So here's Audi. So she is polled. She doesn't have horns, so that's what her phenotype is. I have no idea what her genotype is. I do have a couple clues, though. The problem with Audi is she's only given us ewes, which I love that about her. It's awesome. But this year she did give us a ram. So because she's only given us ewes, it's really, it's been difficult trying to figure out what her genotype is. I do know, though, that her grandsire had a full set of horns. So his phenotype was horned. Now, Knightley is the sire of the lamb we're going to look at. And I believe he is fully polled. So one of the clues is that he's got those deep dish grooves in the top of his head there. You can see in the picture. And the other reason I think that is because practically every ram he's given us has been hornless, has had a phenotype where there's no horns. So I've got a P in italics there in the second place of his makeup. But I am fairly confident that he's fully polled. The mother, Audi, I have no idea. So you see there in the Punnett square, I've got the question marks for the dam, and then for the sire, it's 2 capital P's. So let's see what we got when we bred those two together. When we bred those two together, we have here, it's Sebastian, and you can see that he has horns. He's expressing horns, but those are actually skers. And you can just tell that by their shape, their appearance. They don't have like the grooves of a real set of horns. They're not as broad at the base. If he were to get into an altercation with another ram, those skers could just snap off. So they don't have a strong, they're not seated in there real strong. So those are just called skers. So when we look at the Punnett square, what we know is the sire, like I said, he is homozygous for polled. But what we've learned here is that our dam, Audi, carries horns. So when I breed Audi to a ram, it's possible that she will generate, like she did here, a ram with skers. So we've learned something from this breeding combination. So the next pair I want to talk about is our ewe Ophavia, and we bred her with John Snow. So this is a lamb photograph of John Snow, and you can see he's got little knobs sticking out. So because of that, I'm putting him down with a genotype of carrying horns. Now, it's difficult for me to believe that because A, those little knobs are gone now. It's pretty clean where his horns would be. And he has, to the best of my recollection, never produced a ram with skurs. That could be wrong, and because I haven't been real careful about observing that, but pretty confident. And I'll be more careful going forward when we look at his offspring on the ram side. So Ophavia, I think, carries horns, and the reason I think that is because she's out of Rewick, and Rewick came from White Pines, which is a horn flock. Garrett Ramsey's flock. We brought in a ewe from him. So Ophavia's got the background of horns. So I'm guessing that she's carrying horns, and Jon Snow, I know by looking at him that he's heterozygous for polled. So I've got a lot of information here to go on. So let's see what we got here. So this is their offspring. It's Harry. And Harry, if you can see the photo here, this is a very recent photo of Harry at 2 years old, and he's got skurs. There's little bone nubs there. So that means that he has that polled genotype of uppercase P, lowercase p, probably. I mean, he could have the P prime, but it's really complicated. So we're just going to go with the fact that Harry carries horns, which could validate my theory that Ophavia carries horns as well. It wouldn't have to, though, because if she were fully polled, the horn gene that John carries could have given Harry the skurs. Okay, this stuff is really dense. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about an offspring, a lamb from 2021, coming out of Nita and Harry. Now, according to Julianne, Nita's got that dome on the top of her head. You can see it there. And she also has a little bone, little bit of horn fragment sticking out. So, who the heck knows what she's got going on? I don't know. I'm just not comfortable predicting any of it. We do know Harry's genotype, though. We're pretty confident with that. So we can get a nice different variety of outcomes here. Here's what we got. What we ended up with, this is a ewe. This is a ewe lamb. Her name is Cordelia, and she has got definite little skurs. The one on the left is probably about 3/4 of an inch sticking out of her head, like a little Frito. It's all curled up and adorable. And the one on the right is more of a knob, and it's very possible that the one on the right is shorter just because it's snapped off. All right, so here's what I'm thinking on this one, and I'm not super confident with the horned ewe genes, but I think that she's got that horned ewe. I don't know if she's a carrier of the horned ewe gene. I mean, no, wait, I know she's a carrier. I don't think she's homozygous for that, because if she were homozygous for the horned ewe gene, she would have longer horns by now. So I think she's heterozygous. I think she's carrying the horned ewe gene, but I don't know if her first allele is horned or polled. I don't know if it's capital P or lowercase p. And so I have unlearned a piece of information about Harry now, because he could be, I think, homozygous for the horned ewe gene. I got to think about that a little bit more. So like I said, it's extremely complicated, a lot of things playing around to try and predict an outcome here. So in conclusion, horn genetics in Shetland sheep is a very complicated topic with, in my opinion, a lot of unknowns. And there is this possibility of other genes that are going to influence the outcome. I'm not aware of any DNA testing that's been done to isolate this trait in Shetlands. So here's a really simple takeaway from all of this. If you want polled genetics in your flock, source a ram from a flock that doesn't have horned rams and that from a flock that is selecting for polled rams. And then when you start having lambs and ewes and rams, select for those ewes that produce rams that don't have horns. And it's that simple. That's what we did. I know that's what Julie did because I spoke with her yesterday, and she's like, yeah, it's pretty straightforward. And you can get there fairly quickly because the polled gene is dominant. So I hope I didn't confuse anybody, and I also hope I didn't upset anybody by sharing this information. I think I've done enough disclaiming throughout the deck to make sure that, you know, I'm not putting myself out there as an expert. And there is a lot of really interesting stuff to read. I'm going to keep going. There's a book written about merinos, and there's a few chapters in there, I guess, about horn genetics. I haven't gotten my hands on that yet. But what I'll do is in the show notes here, in the comment section, I'll put all the references that I read. And if you want to, you know, dig them out and give them a look yourself, maybe you can do better at pulling everything together into a summary. So yeah, any comments, any corrections of stuff that you saw there, or any observations, I'd be very excited to hear from you. So, so yeah, go ahead and give me your feedback. But like I said, I don't even know what to say. Yeah, I think that fortunately, like I said in conclusion, the takeaway here is it's not difficult to get a polled flock because we do know for a fact that polled gene is dominant. So you should be able to get there fairly quickly. Another interesting thing that Julianne told me was that they've traced back some of the polled breeders early on, traced back to the original import, and there was one ram who carried horns that was polled. He had a full set of horns, but he was, you know, genetically capital P, lowercase p. And so that ram is where we think the majority of the polled genetics are coming from now. So just thought that was interesting. All right, I'm going to wrap it up here. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it and hope you learned something. Thanks.